They called her broken, weak, unworthy. They were wrong. Aurelia Thornhart stood in the center of the great hall, her bare feet cold against ancient stone, and she did not cry. 300 wolves surrounded her in a perfect circle, their eyes glowing amber in the firelight, their silence louder than any accusation. The ceremonial dress they had given her hung off her thin frame like burial cloth, white and shapeless, marking her for what she was about to become. Nothing. Cast out. Alpha Draven paced before her, massive in his human form, all muscle and raw power wrapped in expensive fabric that did nothing to hide what he truly was. A predator. His boots echoed against stone, with each step the sound cutting through the silence like a countdown. 10 steps to the left, 10 steps to the right, each one deliberate, each one a message. This was theater. This was execution disguised as mercy. Aurelia kept her eyes down, studying the cracks in the stone floor as if they held answers. She had learned long ago that looking up only invited more pain. Looking up meant hope, and hope in the crescent moon pack was a luxury she could not afford. She had been 18 for exactly 7 days. 7 days since the elders had told her she would finally know her fate. 7 days of waiting to discover if the pack would keep her or throw her away like they had threatened her entire life. Now she knew. Draven stopped pacing, the silence stretched. Aurelia could feel every eye on her boring into her skin, weighing, judging, finding her wanting. She knew what they saw. A girl too small, too thin, too pale. An Omega who could barely shift, whose wolf was so weak it took 3 full moons just to manage a partial transformation. A burden the pack had carried for 18 years out of some misplaced sense of obligation to her dead parents. Tonight that obligation ended. Aurelia Thornhart. Draven's voice rolled through the hall like thunder before a storm, deep, commanding, absolute. You stand before the Crescent Moon Pack accused of nothing and guilty of everything. Guilty of weakness, guilty of wasting our resources, guilty of existing without purpose. She did not flinch. She had heard worse. By the laws of our ancestors, Draven continued, his voice taking on the formal cadence of ritual, an Alpha may claim any Omega of age as his mate in Luna. He may bind her to him through the sacred bond, making her his in body, mind, and spirit. This is our way. This has always been our way. Aurelia's hands trembled. She clenched them into fists, hiding the shake, hiding everything. She knew where this was going. Had known for days, though some foolish part of her had hoped otherwise. I, Draven, Shadowcrest Alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack, stand before my people and before the moon herself to make my choice known. The crowd leaned forward as one anticipation crackling through the air like static before lightning. Draven turned to face Aurelia fully. His eyes were cold, empty of everything except contempt. I reject you, Aurelia Thornhart. You are too weak to be my Luna, too broken to bear my children, too worthless to carry my mark. I will not bind myself to damaged goods. I will not condemn my bloodline to your weakness. The words landed like blows. The crowd erupted in whispers and murmurs, in the particular kind of cruel satisfaction that came from watching someone fall. Aurelia felt the rejection like a physical thing, a severing of possibility, a door slamming shut on a future she had never really wanted, but had been taught to expect. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt nothing. Nothing at all. And that terrified her more than anything Draven could say. By the ancient laws, Draven announced, raising his voice over the crowd, a rejected Omega has no place in the pack. She is no longer one of us. She is no longer protected by our laws or warmed by our fire. She is cast out into the world to find her own way or to die trying. The pack has spoken. The moon has witnessed. It is done. Aurelia finally looked up, met Draven's eyes. And in that moment, something shifted in the air around her, something old, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. The firelight flickered, casting strange shadows across the stone walls, and for just a heartbeat, Aurelia could have sworn her own shadow moved independent of her body, stretching and twisting, like something alive. Draven's eyes narrowed. He had seen it too. But before he could speak, before he could question, the moment passed. The shadows returned to normal. The fire burned steady. And Aurelia was just a weak Omega again, standing in a hall full of people who wanted her gone. Go, Draven commanded, before I change my mind and decide you are not even worth the mercy of exile. Aurelia turned toward the massive oak doors at the far end of the hall. They stood open, revealing the night beyond. Snow fell in thick, heavy curtains driven sideways by wind that howled like something wounded. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the past hour. The blizzard the weather reports had warned about all week had finally arrived, and it was going to be brutal. They were sending her out into that, without supplies, without shelter, without even proper clothing. They were sending her out to die. Aurelia took her first step toward the doors, then another. The crowd parted before her, creating a corridor of bodies that led to the exit. Some faces showed pity, most showed nothing. A few showed satisfaction, as if her suffering somehow elevated them. She recognized the girl who had once been her friend standing near the back with her eyes carefully averted. Recognized the woman who had taught her to read now looking away as if Aurelia had already become invisible. No one spoke. No one offered help. No one broke ranks. This was pack law. This was tradition. This was survival of the fittest, and Aurelia had been deemed unfit. She reached the threshold where stone met snow. The cold hit her like a wall. The wind tore at her dress, at her hair, at her skin, hungry and vicious and utterly indifferent to her survival. The snow was already ankle deep and rising fast, each flake sharp as glass against her bare arms. She could not see more than 10 feet in any direction. The forest that bordered the packlands was somewhere out there in the white darkness, but she could not see it. Could not see anything except endless, swirling nothing. She took a breath. It burned going down. Then she stepped outside. The door slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed across the empty night. No going back, no forgiveness, no second chances. The Crescent Moon Pack had made their decision, and their decisions were absolute. Aurelia stood alone in the blizzard and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her heart, that had been broken for years. This was something deeper, something that had been locked away so long she had forgotten it existed. Rage. Pure, absolute, incandescent. She was going to survive this. Not because she wanted to live, but because dying would give them exactly what they wanted. And Aurelia Thornheart was done giving anyone anything. She turned her face into the wind and walked. Time became meaningless in the white. Seconds stretched into minutes, stretched into hours, stretched into an eternity of cold and pain, and the simple mechanical process of putting one foot in front of the other. Aurelia did not think about where she was going, did not plan, did not hope. She just moved because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant dying, and she was not ready to die yet. The rage kept her warm. The rage kept her moving. The rage was the only thing she had left. Her feet went numb first, then her hands, then her face until she could not feel the snow hitting her cheeks anymore, could not feel the wind cutting through her dress like knives. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel of white. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps that frosted the air before her face. Her muscles screamed with exhaustion, with cold, with the sheer effort of forcing her body to keep functioning when every cell was begging her to lie down and rest. Just rest. Just for a moment. No. She stumbled, caught herself, kept walking. The forest had swallowed her an hour ago, though she could not see the trees except as darker shapes in the endless white. The ground sloped upward, forcing her to climb. Her dress snagged on branches she could not see, tearing, shredding until it hung off her in strips. Her skin was ice. Her bones were ice. Everything was ice except the rage, and even that was starting to dim, starting to fade into something quieter, something that felt dangerously close to acceptance. Her foot caught on a buried root. She went down hard. The snow cushioned the fall, but the cold did not. It seeped through what remained of her dress, through her skin, into her core. She lay there for a moment, face down, and felt her body trying to shut down, trying to sleep, trying to surrender to the easiest death nature had to offer. Freezing was supposed to be peaceful. They said you just got tired and went to sleep. They said you did not feel it at the end. They lied. Aurelia felt everything, felt her heart struggling to pump blood that was too cold, too thick, felt her lungs burning with each breath, felt her thoughts scattering like leaves in wind, unable to hold on to a single coherent thread, felt the exact moment her body gave up trying to keep her warm and started the process of dying instead. No. The word formed in her mind, sharp and clear as a bell. No. She had not survived 18 years of neglect and cruelty just to die in the snow like an animal. She had not endured Draven's rejection, the pack's dismissal, the complete erasure of her worth as a person just to let the cold finish what they had started. She was Aurelia Thornheart. She was the last of her bloodline, and she was not done yet. She pushed herself up. Her arms shook with the effort. Her vision swam, but she got to her knees, then to her feet. And that was when she saw it. Light, faint, golden. Impossible. It flickered through the trees ahead, warm and steady against the endless white. A beacon. A promise. A lie, probably some hallucination conjured by her dying brain to make the end more bearable. She did not care. She walked toward it anyway. The light grew brighter with each step, growing from a flicker to a glow to something that pushed back the darkness and the snow and the cold. It was coming from below, she realized. From somewhere underground. The ground sloped down sharply, forming a natural bowl in the earth, and at the bottom of that bowl was the entrance to a cave. And the cave was glowing. Not from fire, not from any natural source. The light came from the walls themselves, from symbols carved into the stone that pulsed with a soft, steady luminescence that felt older than the forest, older than the pack, older than anything Aurelia had ever known. She half walked, half fell down the slope. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, but the moment she crossed the threshold, the wind stopped. The cold lessened. The sound of the blizzard faded to a distant murmur, as if the cave existed in a pocket of space where the storm could not quite reach. Aurelia collapsed just inside the entrance. Her body hit stone, her eyes closed, and for a long moment she simply breathed. In, out, in, out. Still alive, still breathing, still here. When she finally opened her eyes again, the symbols on the walls were brighter, close enough to see clearly. They covered every surface, spiraling up from the floor in patterns that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to shift and change when she was not focusing on them. She did not recognize the language, did not recognize the style, but something about them felt familiar, like a song she had heard once in a dream and never quite forgotten. She pushed herself to sitting. Her hands were blue with cold, the fingers stiff and clumsy. She tucked them under her arms, trying to bring feeling back, trying to stop the violent shaking that had taken over her entire body. She needed warmth, needed shelter, needed to survive the night so she could figure out what came next. One problem at a time. First, assess the space. The cave was larger than it looked from outside, opening up into a chamber maybe 20 feet across. The ceiling was high enough that she could not see it in the dim golden light. The walls were smooth, carved by water over centuries, and covered floor to ceiling in those strange symbols. The air smelled old, dusty, but not stale, like something had been breathing here, circulating the air, keeping the space alive. Second, find resources. She forced herself to her feet, using the wall for support, and began to explore. Her legs shook with every step, threatening to give out, but she pushed through it. Pushed through the exhaustion and the cold and the bone-deep fatigue that said, lie down, rest, give up. No. The back of the cave held treasures she had not dared hope for. A pile of dry wood so old it had turned gray but still burnable. A stack of furs, moth-eaten and ancient, but intact enough to provide warmth. A shallow depression in the floor that had collected rainwater at some point, now frozen solid but meltable. Someone had used this place a long time ago. Long enough that dust covered everything in a thick layer. But the supplies were still here, still usable, still enough to keep her alive. Third, make fire. Aurelia had learned to make fire when she was 6 years old, after the pack had left her overnight in the forest as a test. They had expected her to die or to come crawling back broken and begging. She had done neither. She had built a fire, found food, survived 3 days on her own, and returned with her head high. They had hated her for it. She gathered the driest wood and arranged it carefully in the center of the chamber. Her fingers were clumsy, barely responding to her commands, but she managed. Then she searched her torn dress for the small pouch she always kept hidden in the lining. It was still there, miraculously still intact. Inside were 3 precious matches, carefully wrapped in wax paper to keep them dry. She struck the first match. It flared, died. She struck the second. It caught. She held it to the kindling, the shaking hands, watching, praying, begging any god that might be listening to let this work, to give her this one small mercy. The kindling smoked, smoldered, and caught. The flames spread quickly, consuming the dry wood with a hunger that matched her own. Heat bloomed in the chamber, driving back the cold, filling the space with light that danced across the symbols on the walls and made them seem almost alive. Aurelia collapsed next to the fire. She wrapped the ancient furs around her shaking body and held her hands out to the flames, watching the blue fade from her skin, feeling sensation return in a rush of pins and needles that was almost worse than the numbness. But she was alive, against all odds, against all expectations, against the pack's judgment and the blizzard's fury and her own body's attempt to shut down. She was alive. And as the warmth seeped into her bones and the shaking finally began to ease, Aurelia felt something she had not felt in years. Not hope, not yet, but possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, her story was not over yet. She closed her eyes and let the fire's warmth wash over her, and that was when she heard it. A sound from deeper in the cave. A growl, low, pained, dangerous. Aurelia's eyes snapped open. She was not alone. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab what she could and flee back into the blizzard because whatever was making that sound was a predator, and she was prey, and that was the natural order of things. But Aurelia did not move, could not move, because beneath the growl was something else, something that pulled at her in a way she did not understand, a recognition that went bone deep, that said important. That said meant to be, that said turn back now and you will regret it for the rest of your life. She stood. The furs fell away. The cold rushed back in, but she barely felt it. The growl came again, echoing from somewhere beyond the firelight, from a passage she had not seen before, half hidden behind an outcropping of rock. It was not the growl of something hunting. It was the growl of something hurt, something in pain, something that was using aggression as a shield against vulnerability. She knew that sound, had made it herself more times than she could count. Hello? Her voice came out rough, unused for hours of silence in the blizzard. I am not going to hurt you. The growl intensified, a warning. She took a step toward the passage anyway. I am hurt too, she continued, keeping her voice soft, non-threatening. I am cold. I am alone. I am just trying to survive. Same as you. Silence. She took another step. The passage was narrow, forcing her to turn sideways to fit through. The golden light from the symbols followed her, illuminating the way forward, revealing smooth stone walls that bore more of those ancient carvings. The air changed as she went deeper, grew warmer, heavier, charged with something she could not name but could feel against her skin like static electricity. The passage opened into a smaller chamber, and Aurelia's breath stopped. Two men lay on the stone floor. No, not men, wolves, both something between and beyond. The one on the left was massive, even lying down easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His black hair was matted with blood. His skin was pale, almost luminescent in the golden light, and covered in scars that spoke of a lifetime of violence. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, and his left side was dark with blood from a wound she could not quite see. The one on the right was leaner, but no less powerful, his silver-streaked hair falling across a face that was beautiful in the way knives were beautiful. Sharp, dangerous. His eyes were open, glowing amber in the dim light, fixed on her with an intensity that pinned her in place like a butterfly on a board. His hand pressed against his brother's wound, trying to stem the bleeding, but his own shoulder was torn open, the flesh ragged and raw. Brothers, she knew without being told. Knew from the way they mirrored each other, from the protective way the conscious one held the unconscious one, from the desperate fury in his glowing eyes that said, touch him and die. Help us. The words came out as a growl, barely human-shaped, more by wolf than by man. Please. Aurelia should have run, should have left them to their fate and focused on her own survival. Should have recognized them for what they were. Alphas, powerful beyond anything she had ever encountered. Dangerous. Instead, she crossed the chamber and dropped to her knees beside them. Let me see, she said, reaching for the injured one. The conscious one snarled, grabbing her wrist with a grip that could have shattered bone. His claws extended, sharp and lethal, pressing against her skin hard enough to draw blood. Touch him, and I will tear your throat out. Then he dies. Aurelia met his eyes and did not look away. That wound needs to be cleaned and sealed. He has lost too much blood. He is going into shock. You know this. So either let me help or watch him die. Your choice. The amber eyes searched hers, looking for threat, for deception, for any reason to make good on his promise to kill her. He must not have found it. His grip loosened, his claws retracted. Help him, he said, and the desperation in his voice was naked raw, completely at odds with the lethal predator she knew he was. Please, he is all I have. Aurelia nodded and turned her attention to the wounded man. The injury was bad, worse than bad. Someone had stabbed him with a blade made of silver, the one metal that could truly harm their kind, and had left it deep in his side just below the ribs. The wound was not healing the way it should, was not closing. The silver was poisoning him, keeping his enhanced healing from working slowly, killing him from the inside out. I need to remove the blade, Aurelia said. It is going to hurt him. Badly. Do it. She leaned over the unconscious man, examining the wound, tracing the angle of entry with her eyes. The blade had gone in at an angle, missing the vital organs by inches. Lucky. But the silver had fragmented on impact. She could see the glitter of metal shards deep in the tissue. Those would need to come out too, or the wound would never heal. She looked at the conscious one. I need heat. fire, and something to use as tools, anything metal. He jerked his head toward a pack she had not noticed in the corner. There. She retrieved it, moving quickly, efficiently. Inside, she found what she needed: a knife, a flint, a length of cord. Not much, but enough. She built a small fire in the chamber using the last of her matches and heated the knife blade until it glowed. Then she returned to the wounded man and positioned herself over the wound. "Hold him," she told the brother. "This is going to hurt." The conscious one moved faster than she could track, positioning himself at his brother's head, his hands gripping his brother's shoulders, holding him in place. Aurelia did not hesitate. She grasped the hilt of the silver blade and pulled. The unconscious man convulsed, screamed, eyes flying open, glowing that same amber gold, wild and unseeing, lost in pain. "Hold him!" Aurelia shouted. The brother did, using his full strength, his full alpha dominance, to keep his brother from thrashing, from making the wound worse. The blade came free. Blood poured out hot and dark. Aurelia dropped the silver and grabbed the heated knife. No time for gentleness. No time for anything except survival. She dug into the wound with the hot blade, feeling for the fragments of silver, finding them by the way they burned her fingers even through the blood. One piece. Two. Three. She pulled them out and dropped them on the stone floor, where they hissed and steamed. The wounded man's screams faded to whimpers. His eyes closed again. His breathing turned ragged, but the bleeding was slowing. Now that the silver was out, his body could finally start to heal. Aurelia grabbed the cord and used it to bind the wound closed, pulling the edges together as tightly as she could without cutting off circulation. Her hands were steady despite everything, despite the exhaustion, despite the fear, despite the strangeness of this entire situation. She had always been good at this, good at fixing broken things. Maybe because she knew what it was like to be broken herself. She tied off the binding and sat back on her heels. "Done," she said. "He should heal now, slowly. But he will heal." The conscious one stared at her. His amber eyes were wide, shocked, and something else she could not identify. "Who are you?" he asked. Before she could answer, his hand shot out and grabbed hers. The moment their skin touched, the world exploded. Light, heat, a crack of something that felt like lightning and sounded like thunder and tasted like destiny. It ripped through Aurelia's body, setting every nerve on fire, making her heart stutter and race and stop and start all at once. She could feel him, not just his hand on hers. She could feel his fear for his brother, his exhaustion, his pain, his power, his everything. Could feel the wolf inside him, ancient and vast and deadly, surging toward her with a recognition that transcended thought. Mate. The word resonated in her mind, in her bones, in her soul. Mate, impossible. She was a broken omega. He was clearly an alpha. This could not be happening. But it was. The conscious one snarled and jerked his hand away as if she had burned him. The sensation cut off. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, both terrified of what had just happened. "What?" Aurelia started. A hand grabbed her other wrist. The wounded one, eyes open now, glowing that same amber gold, fixed on her face with an intensity that stole her breath. And when his skin touched hers, it happened again. The lightning, the fire, the sense of recognition so profound it had made her and remade her in the same instant. Mate, from him too, from both of them. Two wolves, two alphas, both calling her mate. "Impossible," the conscious one whispered. But the wounded one smiled, smiled despite the pain, despite the blood, despite everything. "The prophecy," he said, his voice rough but clear. "She is here. After all this time, she is finally here." And Aurelia Thornhart, broken omega, rejected and cast out, looked into the glowing eyes of two alpha wolves and felt her entire world shift on its axis. She had thought her story was ending. She had been wrong. It was only just beginning. The fire had burned down to embers by the time anyone spoke again. Aurelia sat with her back against the cave wall, her arms wrapped around her knees, watching the two brothers. The wounded one had fallen back asleep, his breathing deeper now, more regular, his body finally able to focus on healing now that the silver was out. The conscious one sat beside him, one hand on his brother's shoulder, protective even in rest. But his eyes never left Aurelia. They glowed in the dim light, amber turning to gold and back again, tracking her every movement, cataloging, assessing, trying to understand what had just happened between them. The mate bond, she knew what it was. Every wolf knew. It was the fundamental truth of their kind, the sacred connection between alpha and omega that transcended choice or logic or free will. When a wolf found their mate, they knew, instantly, irrevocably. The bond formed whether they wanted it or not, linking them on every level, physical, emotional, spiritual. One wolf, one mate, one bond. That was the law, except she had just felt it twice, with both brothers, and that was impossible. "What is your name?" the conscious one finally asked. His voice was different now, less growl, more human, but no less dangerous. "Aurelia." She did not see the point in lying. "Aurelia Thornhart." His eyes widened, just a fraction, but she saw it. "Thornhart," he repeated, tasting the name, turning it over in his mind. "I thought that bloodline was extinct." "Apparently not." "Apparently not," he agreed, a pause. "Then I am Cassiel. Cassiel Nightfang. This is my brother Zephyr." Nightfang. The name resonated in her mind, pulling at memories she did not have, at knowledge that felt inherited rather than learned. She had heard that name before, in stories, in legends, in the old tales her mother used to tell her before she died. The Nightfang twins, born under a blood moon, marked by prophecy, created to guard something precious, created to fight something terrible. "You are far from your territory," Aurelia said carefully. "So are you." Fair point. "What happened in Dam?" she asked, gesturing to his wounds, to his brother's still form. "Who did this?" Cassiel's expression darkened. His hand tightened on Zephyr's shoulder. "Hunters. Blackthorn hunters. They ambushed us 3 days ago. We have been running ever since, trying to get to safety, trying to—" He trailed off, his eyes going distant. "It does not matter now. It matters if they are still hunting you. They will not find us here." He said it with absolute certainty. "This place is protected, hidden. Only certain bloodlines can even see the entrance. We thought we would die before we found it, and then you appeared." "I was running too," Aurelia admitted, "from my pack. They cast me out." "Why so?" "Because I am weak, broken, not worth keeping." Cassiel studied her for a long moment. His eyes raked over her, taking in her torn dress, her bare feet, her too thin frame, all the evidence that supported her claim. Then he laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Weak," he repeated. "You just removed silver from a wound with nothing but a hot knife and sheer will. You survived a blizzard that would kill a full alpha. You walked into a cave with 2 injured predators and demanded they let you help. That is not weakness, Aurelia Thornhart. That is survival, and survival is the most powerful thing there is." Something in her chest loosened at his words. Not much, not enough to undo 18 years of being told she was worthless, but enough to matter. "The mate bond," she said, changing the subject because she could not handle his unexpected kindness. "I felt it with both of you. That should not be possible." "It should not be," Cassiel agreed, "for normal wolves, but we are not normal, and neither are you." "What does that mean?" "It means—" He stopped, shook his head. "Zephyr should be the one to explain. He knows the prophecy better than I do. He has spent his entire life studying it, preparing for it, waiting for it. We both have, just we never thought we would actually find you." "Find me?" "You did not find me. I found you." "Did you?" Cassiel's smile was sharp. "Or did the cave bring us together exactly when and where we were meant to meet? This place is ancient, Aurelia. Older than the packs. Older than the territories. Older than any living memory. It has its own power, its own purpose. And that purpose apparently was to ensure that the last sovereign finally found her twin flames. I do not understand any of that. You will." He leaned back against the wall, wincing as the movement pulled at his shoulder wound. "For now you should rest. You are exhausted, hurt, half frozen. Your body needs to recover. So does yours. I have been shot, stabbed, and hunted for 3 days straight. I will live. You, on the other hand, look like you are about to collapse." He was not wrong. Now that the adrenaline was fading, exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. Her hands were shaking again. Her vision was blurring at the edges. Her body was screaming for sleep, for warmth, for rest. But trusting 2 strange alphas, no matter what her instincts were telling her about the mate bond, seemed like a spectacularly bad idea. "I will keep watch," Cassiel said, reading her hesitation. "I swear on my brother's life I will not harm you. You saved him. That makes you pack. That makes you protected. Sleep, Aurelia. You are safe here." She wanted to argue. Wanted to stay awake and on guard because lowering her defenses had only ever led to pain. But her body was done listening to her mind. She curled up on her side, pulling the ancient furs around herself, and let her eyes close. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was Cassiel's voice, soft and wondering. "She is really here. After all these years, she is finally here." And then darkness took her. Aurelia woke to warmth, real warmth. Not the desperate heat of a dying fire or the false promise of hypothermia. This was solid, present, alive. She opened her eyes slowly, her body protesting every small movement, and found herself looking at a ceiling of carved stone that glowed with those same ancient symbols she had seen when she first entered the cave. How long had she slept? Hours, days? Time felt elastic, stretched and compressed in ways that made no sense. She pushed herself up on her elbows and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her skin felt like it had been scraped raw. Her head pounded with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She was alive, yes, but alive in the way that made you question whether survival was actually worth the pain. Easy. The voice came from her left, deep, commanding, but gentler than it had been before. You pushed your body past its limits. It needs time to recover. Aurelia turned her head and found Zephyr sitting against the cave wall watching her, with eyes that had gone from amber to a clear, striking silver in the daylight filtering through the cave entrance. He looked better. Not healed, not by a long shot, but better. The color had returned to his face. His breathing was steady. The wound in his side was bound with clean cloth instead of the makeshift cord she had used. He was also, she realized with a start, devastatingly beautiful. In the chaos of the previous night, she had not really looked at him. Had seen only an injured wolf, a brother, in need of a problem to solve. Now, with sunlight touching his features, she could see what she had missed. The sharp angles of his face. The way his black hair fell across his forehead in waves that looked like they had been carved from shadow. The impossible breadth of his shoulders. The way he moved even sitting still with a predator's grace. This was an alpha, a true alpha. And he was looking at her like she was the most important thing in the world. "Your brother," she managed to ask, her voice rough from disuse. "Hunting. We need food. Real food, not just the dried meat from our packs." Zephyr tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but also made it impossible to do so. "He did not want to leave you, but I convinced him that one of us should stay to ensure you were protected when you woke." "And protected from what?" "From making the mistake of trying to leave before you are ready." It was not a threat, not exactly, but it was not a request either. "I am a prisoner then," Aurelia said flatly. "You are protected," Zephyr corrected. "There is a difference. You saved my life, Aurelia Thornheart. That is a debt I cannot repay. But more than that." He paused and something shifted in his expression, something vulnerable. "You felt it too. Last night when we touched. The bond." Oh, she did not deny it. Could not deny it. "I do not understand it," she admitted. "Neither do I, not fully. But I know what the legends say, what the prophecy promises." He leaned forward, and even that small movement was controlled, powerful, like a wolf deciding whether to pounce. "There are some bonds that transcend the normal laws of our kind. Bonds that were written into the fabric of the world before the first wolf drew breath. Twin flames in their sovereign. Three souls that exist as one, so rare. So rare that most believe they are nothing but fairy tales. But my brother and I, he trailed off, his silver eyes going distant. "We were born knowing we were incomplete. Born with a hole in our chest that nothing could fill. We spent our entire lives searching for what was missing. And last night, when you touched me, that hole closed. For the first time in 28 years, I felt whole." The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything Aurelia thought she understood about herself, about fate, about the world. "I am nobody," she whispered. "A broken omega from a pack that threw me away. How can I be what you are describing? How can I be important to anyone?" Zephyr moved. One moment he was against the wall. The next he was in front of her, kneeling on the furs, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the silver flecks in his eyes that looked like starlight. "You are not broken," he said, and each word carried the weight of absolute truth. "You are a Thornheart, the last of a bloodline that ruled all wolves for 1,000 years. Your ancestors were gods among our kind, sovereigns. They did not lead through force or fear. They led through power so absolute that every wolf in their presence had no choice but to submit. That power runs in your veins, Aurelia, dormant, sealed away by your ancestors to protect you from those who would hunt you. But it is there, I can feel it. My wolf can feel it. And when the time comes when you are ready, that power will wake. And when it does, the world will kneel." Aurelia stared at him, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for the moment when he would laugh and tell her it was all a joke, that she was as worthless as Draven had said, that she was nothing special. But Zephyr did not laugh. He just watched her with those silver eyes and waited for her to understand what he already knew. "I do not feel powerful," she said. "Power is not always loud. Sometimes the strongest steel is forged in the quietest fires. You survived 18 years of neglect. You survived rejection. You survived a blizzard that would have killed an alpha twice your size. You saved my life with nothing but determination and a hot knife. That is power, Aurelia, the kind that cannot be taught or given, the kind you are born with. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. But 18 years of being told she was worthless had built walls around her heart that no amount of pretty words could break down in a single conversation. Zephyr must have seen it in her face. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he cupped her cheek with one large hand. His palm was warm against her skin. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. "You do not have to believe me yet," he said softly, "but you will, because my brother and I are going to spend every day proving to you that you are worth more than your old pack ever had the vision to see. You are ours, Aurelia, our mate, our sovereign, our everything, and we protect what is ours." The cave entrance darkened. Cassiel stood silhouetted against the light, a deer carcass slung over his shoulder like it weighed nothing. His amber eyes found Aurelia immediately, and even from across the chamber, she could feel the weight of his attention, the way his wolf surged toward her with the same recognition Zephyr's had shown. Mate. The word resonated through her bones, from both of them, pulling at her, claiming her, whether she was ready or not. They ate in silence. Cassiel had field-dressed the deer with expert efficiency, and now strips of meat roasted over a fire he had built near the cave entrance. The smell made Aurelia's stomach clench with hunger so sharp it was almost painful. She could not remember the last time she had eaten. Yesterday, the day before, time had become meaningless somewhere between the rejection and the blizzard, and waking up in a cave with two alpha wolves who claimed she was their destiny. Cassiel handed her the first piece of cooked meat without a word. When she hesitated, he raised an eyebrow. "You need to eat. Your body has been through trauma. It needs fuel to heal." "You are injured too," she pointed out. "I am also twice your size and heal 3 times as fast. Eat, Aurelia. Do not make me make it in order." There was no heat in the words, just certainty. She took the meat and bit into it, and the taste exploded across her tongue, rich and warm, and so good she almost moaned. She had not realized how hungry she was until that first bite. She devoured the piece and reached for another before she even finished chewing. Cassiel smiled. It transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. "There she is," he said. "I was starting to worry you did not have any fight left in you." "I have plenty of fight." "Good. You are going to need it." The statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Aurelia set down the meat. "What does that mean?" Cassiel and Zephyr exchanged a look. One of those silent conversations that spoke of decades spent as two halves of the same whole. Then Cassiel sighed and sat down across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched. "We cannot stay here forever," he said. "The cave is protected, yes, but only for so long. The Blackthorn hunters who attacked us will not give up just because they lost our trail. They know we are wounded. They know we are alone. They will keep searching, and eventually they will find us." "Then we run," Aurelia said. "We leave before they get close." "Run where?" Zephyr asked quietly. "The Blackthorn territory surrounds this entire region, north, south, east, west. All of it belongs to Raven Blackthorn and his clan. The only safe place within 500 miles is our territory, Silver Peak. But reaching it means crossing in Blackthorn land while injured, while being hunted, and with you unable to shift to keep pace. Then you go without me. I will find my own way." "No." The word came from both brothers simultaneously, spoken with such unified finality that it allowed no argument. "You are our mate," Cassiel said. "We do not abandon our mates. Ever. For any reason, we would die first. You might die anyway if you tried to take me with you." "Then we die together." Zephyr leaned forward, his silver eyes intense. "But I do not think we will, because you are stronger than you know, and because there is another option, a better option, one that will give us the power to not just survive, but to win." Aurelia's heart began to pound. "What option?" "The mate bond," Cassiel said. "Right now it is incomplete. We felt the recognition, yes, but the bond itself is not sealed. If we complete it, if we perform the marking ceremony, the three of us will become something greater than we are individually. Our strengths will merge. Our healing will accelerate. Our power will multiply. You will be able to access our speed, our strength, our senses, and we will be able to draw on your sovereign authority, the power in your blood that makes other wolves submit." "I do not have any authority. I am an Omega." "You are a sovereign," Zephyr corrected gently. The Omega status your pack assigned you was based on your inability to shift fully. But that inability is not weakness. It is a seal, a protection your bloodline placed on itself generations ago to hide from extinction. The marking ceremony will not just bind us together. It will break that seal. It will wake your wolf. And when it does, Aurelia, you will shift into your true form. Not an Omega, a sovereign. The word should have sounded insane, should have sounded like the ravings of wolves who had lost too much blood and not enough sanity. But something deep in Aurelia's chest recognized the truth in them, recognized it and responded with a pulse of something that felt like power waiting to be unleashed. What does the ceremony involve? She asked carefully. Blood, Cassiel said. Exchange of blood between all three of us. We bite you here. He reached out and traced a line along the side of her neck, just above the shoulder. And even that light touch sent electricity racing down her spine. You bite us in the same place. The exchange creates a permanent bond. We become able to sense each other's emotions, share thoughts, when necessary, draw on each other's strength. And you are certain this will work, that I am actually what you say I am. I am certain, Zephyr said, that my wolf has never been wrong about anything that mattered. And he is screaming at me right now that you are the one we have been searching for, that you are meant for this, that you are meant for us. Aurelia looked between them, these two alphas, these strangers who had somehow become the most important people in her world in the span of a single night. She should have said no, should have told them this was insane, that she needed time, that bonding herself to two predators when she barely knew her own name was the opposite of rational. But rationality had never served her well. Rationality had told her to endure her pack's cruelty. Rationality had told her to accept Draven's rejection. Rationality had told her to lie down in the snow and die. And she was done listening to rationality. If I agree to this, she said slowly, I need to know it is my choice. Not destiny, not prophecy, not some cosmic plan written before I was born. My choice. Do you understand? Yes, both brothers said in unison. And if I decide later that I made a mistake, that this is not what I want, you will let me go. Zephyr flinched. Cassiel's jaw tightened, but they both nodded. You are not a prisoner, Cassiel said. You will never be a prisoner. If you want to leave, we will not stop you. It will destroy us, but we will not stop you. The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. Aurelia took a breath, let it out, made her decision. Then I choose yes. I choose the bond. I choose you, both of you. They prepared as the sun set, painting the cave entrance in shades of red and gold. Cassiel had insisted they wait until dark. The bond is strongest under moonlight, he had explained, and we will need every advantage we can get. Now the three of them sat in a triangle in the center of the chamber, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls, making the ancient symbols seem to move and breathe. Aurelia was nervous, more nervous than she had been facing the blizzard or pulling silver from a wound. This was permanent, irrevocable, the kind of choice that would define the rest of her life. But when she looked at Zephyr, at the careful way he was watching her, ready to stop everything if she showed even a hint of doubt, her nerves settled. And when she looked at Cassiel, at the fierce protectiveness in his amber eyes, at the way his hands clenched and unclenched as if restraining himself from reaching for her, she felt something else. Want. Not just acceptance of necessity, but actual, genuine want. She wanted this. Wanted them. Wanted to know what it felt like to belong to someone who would fight for her instead of against her. How do we start? She asked. I go first, Zephyr said. I will mark you, and you will mark me. Then Cassiel will mark you, and you will mark him. Then Cassiel and I will mark each other, completing the triangle. The exchange has to happen in that specific order for the bond to seal properly. Will it hurt? Yes, he said honestly, but not for long. And once the bond snaps into place, the pain will transform into something else, something better. He moved closer to her, knelt in front of her, reached out and gently moved her hair away from her neck, exposing the vulnerable line of her throat. His fingers were warm against her skin. His breath ghosted across her pulse point. Last chance to change your mind, he whispered. I am not changing my mind. Then hold on to me. This part is intense. She put her hands on his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath his skin, and nodded. Zephyr leaned in. His lips brushed her neck, soft, almost reverent. Then his teeth sank in. The pain was immediate and sharp, a burst of fire that made her gasp and her fingers dig into his shoulders. But it lasted only a heartbeat before something else flooded through her. Something that felt like light and heat and recognition all at once. She could feel him, not just physically. She could feel his emotions, his thoughts, his wolf crying out in triumph as the first thread of the bond snapped into place. Zephyr pulled back his teeth, leaving her skin, and she saw her blood on his lips, dark and glistening in the firelight. "Your turn," he said, his voice rough. He tilted his head, exposing his own neck. Aurelia hesitated for only a moment. Then she leaned forward and bit. Her human teeth were nowhere near as sharp as his, but she bit down hard enough to break skin to taste his blood, copper and wild and something indefinably him. The bond flared brighter, stronger, wrapping around her heart like a chain made of starlight. When she pulled back, Zephyr's eyes had gone completely silver, glowing, feral, beautiful. "Cassiel," he said, his voice barely human. "Your turn." Cassiel moved with predatory grace, positioning himself behind Aurelia, his chest against her back, his hand gentle on her shoulder as he turned her head to expose the other side of her neck. "I have got you," he murmured against her ear. "I will not let you fall." Then he bit, and the world exploded. This time the pain was less, the pleasure more. The bond that had formed with Zephyr caught fire and burned through her veins, and when Cassiel's bite connected, it was like completing a circuit. Power flooded through her, not hers, theirs. Their strength, their speed, their centuries of experience condensed into pure sensation that overwhelmed everything else. She bit him back without being told, tasted his blood, felt his wolf rise to meet hers with a possessiveness that should have been terrifying, but instead felt like coming home. When they separated, Aurelia was shaking, not from fear, from power, from the sheer intensity of feeling two souls wrap around hers and declare mine with a certainty that transcended words. "The final exchange," Zephyr said. The brothers moved together, facing each other, and bit down simultaneously, their teeth finding the marks they had clearly given and received many times before. The bond snapped closed like a lock clicking into place, and Aurelia felt it complete. Felt the triangle form, felt herself become the third point in something ancient and unbreakable and terrifyingly powerful. She threw her head back and screamed. Not in pain, in transformation. Her body convulsed. Her bones began to shift. And for the first time in her life, Aurelia Thornhart felt her wolf wake. The shift was agony. Every bone in her body broke and reformed. Every muscle tore and rebuilt. Every nerve caught fire and burned until there was nothing left but ash and the promise of rebirth. She had never shifted fully before, had only ever managed a partial transformation that left her caught between human and wolf, too weak to be useful, too broken to complete the change. But this was different. This was not her weak Omega wolf struggling against a seal it could not break. This was something vast and ancient and unstoppable, ripping free of chains that had held it dormant for generations. Through the pain, she felt Cassiel and Zephyr on either side of her, their hands on her shoulders, their voices speaking words she could not understand, but felt nonetheless. Anchor, safety, pack. The shift completed with a final crack of bone. Aurelia hit the ground on 4 paws instead of 2 feet, and the world transformed. Colors became sharper. Sounds became clearer. Scents exploded across her awareness in layers of information she had never been able to access before. She could smell the deer blood from dinner, the smoke from the fire, the stone and earth and ancient magic that permeated the cave, and she could smell them. Cassiel and Zephyr, her mates, her pack, her everything. She turned her head and caught sight of herself reflected in a pool of water near the cave wall. The wolf looking back at her was not small, was not weak, was not broken. She was massive, easily as large as an alpha male with fur so white it seemed to glow in the firelight. Her eyes burned gold bright as coins, bright as the sun, bright as something divine. And around her neck, where the brothers had bitten her twin marks, pulsed with silver light. The sovereign mark. "Aurelia," Cassiel's voice was hushed, reverent. "Look at you." She turned to face them and watched both alphas drop to one knee, submitting. Not because that she had commanded it, but because their wolves gave them no choice. In the presence of a sovereign, all wolves knelt. She took a step toward them, testing her new body, feeling the power in her muscles, the strength in her limbs, the absolute certainty that she could run for days without tiring, could fight without fear, could survive anything the world threw at her. This was what she was meant to be. This was what her ancestors had sealed away to protect their children from a world that would have destroyed them for their power. And now she was awake. Zephyr raised his eyes to hers. "How do you feel?" Aurelia tried to answer and realized she could not speak in this form. But the bond was open now, wider and deeper than before, and she could push thoughts through it instead of words. "Powerful," she sent. "Whole. Like I have been asleep my entire life and finally woke up." "Good." Well, see, Cassiel stood and Zephyr followed. Because we are going to need that power, all of it. The bond is complete, but we are not safe yet. We need to get to Silver Peak before the Blackthorn hunters find us. And we need to do it fast. Can I shift back? Aurelia asked through the bond. Yes, Zephyr said. Just visualize your human form and let the wolf recede. It will hurt the first few times, but it gets easier. She focused, imagined her human body, and shifted back with a pain that was blessedly brief compared to the first transformation. She collapsed to her knees naked, shaking and more alive than she had ever been. Cassiel was there immediately, wrapping a fur around her shoulders, his touch gentle, despite the predator that lurked beneath his skin. You did beautifully, he said. When do we leave? She asked. Dawn, Zephyr said. We travel fast and we travel light. Silver Peak is 3 days away if we push hard. 2 if we are lucky. We just have to stay ahead of the hunters long enough to cross the border into our territory. Once we are on Nightfang land, we are safe. Raven Blackthorn would not dare attack us there. Not openly. And what happens when we reach Silver Peak? You meet our pack, Cassiel said. You take your place as our mate, as our sovereign, and you help us end Raven's reign of terror once and for all. Aurelia looked at the 2 alphas who had become her entire world in the span of 2 days. Her mates, her pack, her future. Then let's go home, she said. They left at first light. The blizzard had passed, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of fresh snow that sparkled in the early morning sun like diamonds. The sky was clear, painfully blue, and the temperature had dropped to bone-chilling cold. But Aurelia barely felt it. The mate bond had changed something fundamental in her physiology. She could feel Cassiel and Zephyr's warmth through the connection, could draw on their strength to regulate her own body temperature. It was not perfect. She still felt the cold, but it no longer threatened to kill her. They moved fast, the brothers setting a pace that would have been impossible for her yesterday, but that she now matched with ease. Her new wolf form was built for speed, for endurance, for crossing vast distances without stopping. She ran between Cassiel and Zephyr, their bodies forming a protective triangle around her, their senses stretched to their limits, watching for any sign of pursuit. For the first hour, there was nothing, just endless white forest and the crunch of snow beneath their paws. Then Cassiel's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring. We have company, he said through the bond. Blackthorn scouts. 3 of them. Half a mile behind us and closing fast. How did they find us so quickly? Aurelia asked. They have trackers, Zephyr answered. Wolves whose entire purpose is hunting. They can follow a scent trail days old across any terrain. We knew they would pick up our trail eventually. We just hoped we would have more time. What do? We run faster. They did. The forest blurred around Aurelia as she pushed her new body to its limits. Her paws eating up ground, her muscles burning with exertion, but not failing, not even close to failing. She could feel the scouts behind them through some sixth sense the bond had given her, could feel their determination, their hunger for the kill. They were not going to stop, neither was she. They ran for 2 hours without slowing. The scouts gained, not much, but enough. We need to lose them, Cassiel said. We are still a day and a half from the border. We cannot maintain this pace for that long. The river, Zephyr said suddenly. The Silver Run River cuts through the forest 10 miles north of here. If we can reach it, we can cross and break our scent trail in the water. That means going deeper into Blackthorn territory. I know, but it is our best option. Maybe our only option. They changed direction, headed north. The scouts followed, always behind them, always closing. The river appeared through the trees like a knife slash across the white landscape, dark and fast-moving and half-frozen despite the cold. Ice clung to the banks, creating treacherous footing, and the water that flowed beneath was so cold it would kill a human in minutes. But they were not human. Cross, Zephyr commanded. Stay together. Do not let the current separate us. They plunged into the river as one. The cold was shocking even to Aurelia's enhanced physiology. It stole her breath, made her muscles seize, tried to drag her under with currents that pulled at her legs and threatened to sweep her downstream. But Cassiel was on her right, his larger body breaking the worst of the current, and Zephyr was on her left, his strength keeping her steady. Together they crossed, reached the far bank, scrambled up onto solid ground. Behind them, the 3 Blackthorn scouts reached the river's edge and stopped. They did not cross. Just stood there, staring across the water, their eyes glowing amber with frustrated rage. Why aren't they following? Aurelia asked. Because they just figured out where we are going, Cassiel said grimly, and they know we will not make it. Aurelia turned to look at him, ice crystals forming on her white fur. What does that mean? It means, Zephyr said, his voice heavy with resignation, that we just crossed into the most dangerous or to Blackthorn territory. The hunting grounds. The place where Raven Blackthorn himself patrols, and if he catches our scent, he did not need to finish the sentence. They all knew what it meant. If Raven found them, they would not reach Silver Peak. They would not reach safety. They would die, or worse. Then we move, Aurelia said, fast and quiet. We do not give him a chance to find us. The brothers looked at her, their sovereign, their mate, their reason for living, and they nodded. They ran deeper into enemy territory, knowing that every step brought them closer to home or closer to death. There was no middle ground, no safe option, only the choice to keep fighting or to give up. And none of them knew how to give up. So they ran and prayed they would be fast enough. Night fell like a hammer. One moment the sky was gray with twilight. The next it was black, moonless, filled with stars so bright and cold they looked like chips of ice scattered across velvet. They had been running for 12 hours. Aurelia's body was beyond exhaustion, operating on pure adrenaline and stubborn refusal to collapse. Her paws were bleeding from the rough terrain. Her lungs burned with every breath. Her muscles shook with the effort of keeping pace. But she did not stop, could not stop, because behind them, somewhere in the dark, Raven Blackthorn was hunting. She could feel him, not through the bond, through something older. Some predator instinct that recognized a bigger predator, a stronger predator, a predator that had been hunting for 40 years and had never lost a prey he truly wanted. "We need to rest," Cassiel said through the bond, his own exhaustion bleeding through the connection. "Just for a few hours. We are no good to anyone if we collapse from fatigue." "Where?" Zephyr asked. "There is no shelter here, no caves, no safe ground." "There." Aurelia sent an image through the bond. A massive fallen tree, its trunk hollowed out by age and rot, large enough to hide all three of them. She had spotted it 2 miles back, had filed it away as a potential sanctuary. They backtracked, found the tree, crawled inside the hollow trunk, and huddled together, their body heat the only thing keeping the killing cold at bay. Aurelia shifted back to human form to conserve energy. The brothers stayed in wolf form, their larger bodies bracketing hers, their fur providing warmth and comfort and the illusion of safety. She could feel their wolves through the bond, could feel their exhaustion matching hers, could feel their determination to protect her even if it cost them everything. "Sleep," Zephyr's voice rumbled through the bond. "We will keep watch. You are safe." But she was not safe. None of them were, because somewhere out in the dark a monster was coming. And when he arrived, there would be nowhere left to run. Aurelia closed her eyes anyway, let exhaustion drag her down, and dreamed of blood and snow and eyes that glowed red instead of amber. She woke to growling, low, threatening, coming from both brothers at once. She opened her eyes and found them standing at the entrance to the hollow tree. Their bodies tensed, their hackles raised, their teeth bared at something she could not see. "What?" she started. "Stay back," Cassiel snarled. But she could not stay back, because she could smell it too now. Blood, fresh blood, and beneath that, a scent that made her wolf recoil in terror. Alpha, ancient, powerful beyond measure. Raven Blackthorn had found them. He stood in the moonlight like a nightmare given flesh. Raven Blackthorn, Alpha King of the largest territory in the north, ruler of 10,000 wolves, predator who had spent 40 years crushing anyone who dared challenge his authority. He was enormous, even in his human form, standing 7 feet tall with his shoulders broad enough to block the stars. His skin was weathered, scarred, the map of 1,000 battles etched into flesh that refused to die. His hair was iron gray, pulled back from a face that might have been handsome once, but had been hardened by decades of violence into something that transcended beauty and entered the territory of pure distilled menace. His eyes glowed red in the darkness. Not amber, not gold, red. The mark of an alpha who had killed so many wolves, consumed so much power that his very nature had transformed into something unnatural, something wrong. Behind him stood 20 wolves in their animal forms, all massive, all battle-scarred, all watching the hollow tree with the patient hunger of predators who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. And beside Raven in her human form stood Isolde Ashenmore. The moment Aurelia saw her, the pieces clicked into place. The rival who had appeared at Silver Peak, the woman who had loved Zephyr and been cast aside, the jealous heart that had chosen revenge over loyalty. She had led Raven right to them. "Hello, Nightfang whelps." Raven's voice was gravel and smoke, the sound of something that had forgotten how to be gentle. "I have been looking for you. 3 days now. You led me on quite the chase. I would be impressed if I was not so deeply annoyed." Cassiel and Zephyr did not answer, just stood there blocking the entrance to the hollow tree with their bodies prepared to die before they let Raven reach Aurelia. Raven's red eyes slid past them, found Aurelia huddled in the shadows. and his expression changed. Shock, recognition, hunger. Well, he said softly, this is unexpected. I thought I had killed the last Thornheart 15 years ago. A family in Scotland. Mother, father, 3 children. I burned their house to the foundation, salted the earth, made certain no trace of their bloodline remained. His lips pulled back in something that was not quite a smile. Apparently I missed one. Aurelia felt ice slide down her spine. He was talking about her family, her real family, the parents she barely remembered, the siblings she had never known, the life that had been stolen from her before she was old enough to understand what she had lost. Raven had killed them, and he was proud of it. You are going to die for that, Zephyr said, his voice absolutely calm, absolutely certain. You are going to die screaming, and we are going to enjoy every second of it. Bold words from a wolf standing between me and something I want. Raven took a step forward. Move aside, Nightfang. This does not have to involve you. I have no quarrel with your pack. I want the girl. Give her to me, and you can walk away. You have my word. Your word is worthless, Cassiel snarled. You attacked us unprovoked. You hunted us like animals, and now you want us to trust you. I attacked you because you were in my territory without permission. That is my right, but I am willing to be reasonable. The girl comes with me. You go home. Everyone lives. It is a fair trade. She is our mate, Zephyr said. She goes nowhere without us. Raven's eyebrows rose. Your mate, both of you. He laughed, and the sound was ugly. The twin flame prophecy. I heard the stories, but never believed them. And you are telling me you found your sovereign in a broken Omega, hiding in the woods. That is either the greatest fortune in the history of our kind or the most pathetic delusion I have ever witnessed. It is the truth, Aurelia said, stepping forward before she could stop herself. I am their mate, and I am sovereign, and if you want me, you will have to go through them first. Raven's red eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, she saw something flicker across his face. Fear. He felt it. The power in her blood, the authority that made his wolf want to submit even as his human mind rejected the possibility. Interesting, he said. You do carry the mark, faint, buried, but there. The old bloodlines always show eventually, no matter how carefully they try to hide. He tilted his head, considering. This changes things. I cannot simply kill you now. You are too valuable. The sovereign bloodline carries power that could revolutionize our kind. If you were to bear children, if that power could be passed down. He smiled, and it was the smile of a snake eyeing a mouse. You will come with me, Thornheart. Not as my prisoner, as my mate, my Luna. You will give me heirs who carry both my strength and your authority. Together we will build a dynasty that will rule for 1,000 years. Revulsion rolled through Aurelia in waves. I would rather die. That can be arranged too, Raven said pleasantly, but it seems wasteful. So I will give you a choice. Come with me willingly and your mates live. Refuse and I kill them in front of you. Slowly. Then I take you anyway. Either way, you are mine. The only variable it is how much blood I have to spill to claim you. You cannot have her, Cassiel said. Then you die. Raven moved, then. Faster than anything that size should be able to move. One moment he was standing 20 feet away. The next he was on top of Cassiel, his hand wrapped around the younger Alpha's throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. Cassiel shifted midair, his wolf form erupting in a burst of silver fur and snapping teeth, but Raven just laughed and threw him into a tree hard enough to crack the trunk. Zephyr attacked from the side, his black wolf form a blur of fangs and fury. Raven caught him by the throat mid-leap and slammed him into the ground with enough force to create a crater. Then he knelt on Zephyr's chest, pinning him, and looked back at Aurelia. Your mates are brave, he said conversationally, as if he was not currently crushing the life out of the wolf beneath him. But bravery without power is just suicide with extra steps. They cannot protect you from me. No one can. Aurelia felt the mate bond screaming in her chest. Felt Cassiel's pain as his ribs cracked. Felt Zephyr's terror as his air was cut off. Felt their wolves crying out for her, begging her to run to save herself, to let them die if it meant she survived. No, she had not found them, had not bonded with them, had not discovered who she truly was, just to lose them now. She shifted. The transformation was faster this time, easier, her body remembering the shape of her wolf and sliding into it like putting on familiar clothes. She burst out of the hollow tree in her white wolf form, her golden eyes blazing, and threw herself at Raven with every ounce of speed and strength she possessed. She hit him like a battering ram, knocked him off Zephyr. gave the black wolf time to scramble away, gasping, his throat bruised, but intact. Aurelia spun to face Raven, placing herself between him and her mates, her teeth bared. Her hackles raised, every instinct screaming at her to protect, to defend, to fight. Raven stood slowly, looked at her, and smiled. There she is, he said, the true sovereign, beautiful, powerful, exactly what I need. He began to circle her, and his 20 warriors spread out surrounding them, cutting off any escape. You know what I find fascinating about sovereigns? They do not lead through fear or force. They lead through absolute authority. One command from a true sovereign, and every wolf within hearing distance has no choice but to obey. It is compulsion written into the very fabric of our DNA. We were bred to submit to that power, to worship it. He stopped circling, faced her directly. So go ahead, little sovereign. Give me a command. Tell me to kneel. Let us see if your authority is real or if you are just a broken omega pretending to be something you are not. Aurelia felt the weight of his challenge, felt the eyes of 20 warriors watching, felt Cassiel and Zephyr behind her, battered but alive, ready to fight to their last breath if she gave the word. She could do this. The power was there. She could feel it buried deep in her chest, waiting to be unleashed. All she had to do was reach for it. All she had to do was speak with the voice of her ancestors and watch this monster fall to his knees. Except, she did not know how. The bond had awakened her. Wolf had broken the seal on her bloodline, but it had not come with instructions. She was like a child handed a sword and told to fight a war. She had the weapon, but no idea how to use it. Raven saw the hesitation, saw the doubt, and he laughed. That is what I thought. You are not ready, not trained, not strong enough to command a troop of Alpha, let alone an army. He gestured and his warriors closed in. Take her, kill the Night Fangs, make it slow. The world exploded into violence. 20 wolves attacked as one, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers. Cassiel and Zephyr met them head-on, their wolves moving in perfect synchronization, fighting with the desperation of males who knew they were outmatched, but refused to go down without taking as many enemies with them as possible. Aurelia tried to help, tried to fight, but she had only been a wolf for 2 days. She did not have their experience, their training, their instincts. She was powerful, yet, but power without skill was just potential waiting to be crushed. A massive brown wolf slammed into her side, knocking her off her feet. She rolled, came up snarling, and found herself facing 3 more. They circled her, cutting her off from Cassiel, and Zephyr driving her away from her mates, herding her like prey toward Raven. She snapped at the closest one, her teeth finding fur and flesh tasting blood. But there were too many. Always too many. A wolf hit her from behind, another from the side. They bore her down through sheer weight, pinning her to the frozen ground, their teeth at her throat, waiting for Raven's command to kill. Enough! The warriors froze. Raven approached slowly, his red eyes fixed on Aurelia's struggling form. Shift back, human form, now. She did not want to obey. But with 3 wolves holding her down, she had no choice. She shifted back, and the cold hit her, immediately biting into her naked skin, stealing her breath. The wolves released her, but did not back away, keeping her surrounded, keeping her trapped. Raven crouched in front of her, still in his human form, and reached out to cup her face with one massive hand. His touch was not gentle. You have potential, he said, raw power waiting to be shaped. Under my guidance, you could become something magnificent. A true sovereign, a queen worthy of the title. His thumb traced her jaw, and his smile was the smile of a predator that had already won. But first we need to break you of this ridiculous loyalty to the Night Fangs. They are weak, soft. They want to protect you when what you need is to be pushed, tested, forged into something harder. I can give you that. I can make you strong. I would rather die, Aurelia spat. That is your fear talking. You will understand in time. You will thank me. I will kill you. Raven laughed and stood, gesturing to his warriors. Find her, Silver. I want her unable to shift. And kill Wait. The voice came from behind Raven. Isolde stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. If I may suggest, my lord, killing the Night Fangs might be premature. Raven turned to look at her, one eyebrow raised. Explain. The bond, Isolde said smoothly. If you kill her mates while the bond is fresh, the backlash could damage her mind. Break her completely. You said you want her strong, not broken. Better to keep them alive, for now. Use them as leverage, as motivation. Make her watch them suffer, and she will learn obedience far faster than she would through any other method. The words were logical, practical, utterly without mercy. Aurelia stared at Isolde, And in that moment, she understood. This woman did not just want Zephyr. She wanted to destroy everything Aurelia had, everything she was, everything she could be. She wanted to watch Aurelia break, not because it served any purpose, but because her jealousy demanded it. Interesting idea, Revan said. Very well. Take the Night Fangs alive. Chain them in silver. Let them watch as I claim what is mine. No, the words screamed through Aurelia's mind, through the mate bond, through every fiber of her being. She would not let this happen. Would not let them be hurt because of her. Would not silver chains wrapped around her wrists, burning her skin, cutting off her connection to her wolf. She screamed more from frustration than pain and fought against her captors with every ounce of strength she had left. It was not enough. It was never enough. They dragged her away from her mates, away from the only people in the world who had ever made her feel like she mattered, and she watched through tears as Cassiel and Zephyr were beaten down, chains subdued. The last thing she saw before they forced a hood over her head was Zephyr's silver eyes glowing in the darkness, filled with a promise. We will come for you. We will never stop coming for you. We will burn the world to ash before we let him keep you. Then the darkness swallowed her, and Aurelia Thornheart's sovereign mate fighter was dragged into captivity by a monster who thought he had already won. He was wrong, but she would have to survive long enough to prove it. Aurelia stood in Revan's tent, the silver chains burning her wrists, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not her resolve, her fear. She had been afraid for so long, afraid of her pack, afraid of rejection, afraid of the cold and the dark and the endless possibility that maybe everyone was right, maybe she was worthless, maybe survival was the best she could hope for. But she was not afraid anymore. She was furious. This monster had killed her family, had hunted her mates, had threatened to torture the only people in the world she loved. And he thought she would submit. He thought she would break. He did not know her at all. The tent exploded inward. Two wolves, one black, one silver, tore through the fabric like it was paper. They hit the ground running, their eyes blazing with fury, their teeth bared in snarls that promised death. Cassiel and Zephyr. Free. The chains that had bound them lay broken in the snow outside, shattered through sheer impossible strength and the desperation of mates who would rather die than let their females suffer alone. Raven spun his hand going to the knife at his belt, but he was too slow. Zephyr hit him like a meteor, bearing the larger alpha to the ground, his teeth finding Raven's shoulder and tearing deep. Raven roared and threw him off, shifting into his wolf form, mid-motion a massive brown beast with red eyes that glowed like embers. Cassiel was already moving his silver wolf, circling, looking for an opening, working in perfect sync with his brother, the way they had for decades. But Raven was not some ordinary alpha. He was 40 years of violence and power condensed into one nearly unstoppable force. He caught Cassiel's attack, his massive jaws clamping down on the silver wolf's leg, and Aurelia heard the bone snap through the mate bond. Cassiel yelped, tried to pull away, and Raven shook him like a rag doll before hurling him into the tent pole hard enough to collapse half the structure. Zephyr attacked again, going for the throat, but Raven twisted and caught him instead, his teeth finding the black wolf's already injured shoulder and tearing the wound open further. They were losing, even working together, even fueled by rage and love and desperation. They were losing. Raven was too strong, too experienced, too willing to do whatever it took to win. Aurelia felt the mate bond screaming as her mates were systematically destroyed, and she knew with absolute certainty that if she did not do something right now, they were going to die. And she would be alone. Again. No, she had survived 18 years of being told she was worthless. She had survived rejection and exile and a blizzard that should have killed her. She had survived waking up to power she did not understand and bonding with two alphas who saw her as more than broken. She was not going to lose them now. The silver chains burned her wrists, cutting her off from her wolf, from her power, from everything except the raw humanity that had carried her this far. But maybe that was enough. Maybe humanity was all she needed. She closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, past the wolf, past the sovereign mark, past everything supernatural and ancient and powerful, and found the one thing that had never failed her. Will. Pure, stubborn, unbreakable will. The will that said no. The will that said mine. The will that said enough. She opened her eyes and they blazed gold. Not with wolf power, with something older. Something that existed before wolves learned to shift, before packs learned to organize, before any of this was even possible. Authority, absolute, undeniable, sovereign. Kneel. The word ripped out of her throat with the force of a command that had been building for 1,000 years. It was not loud, did not echo, but it struck every wolf within a mile radius like a physical blow, like a hand reaching into their chest and squeezing their hearts until obedience was the only option. Raven froze mid-attack, his jaws inches from Zephyr's throat. His legs trembled, his wolf whined, and then slowly, inexorably fighting every second of it with everything he had, Raven Blackthorn dropped to his belly and pressed his forehead to the ground, submitting to her. Around the camp, Aurelia felt dozens of wolves collapse as the command spread like wildfire through the pack bond. Warriors, scouts, hunters, all of them forced to their knees by a power they could not resist, could not fight, could not even understand. The sovereign had spoken, and they had no choice but to obey. Aurelia stood, the silver chains still burning her wrists, and walked toward Raven. Her bare feet left prints into the dirt. Her breath misted in the cold air. She was naked, bleeding, exhausted, and she had never felt more powerful in her life. "You made a mistake," she said, standing over the prone Alpha. "You thought I was weak because I could not access my power. You thought you could break me because others had tried and succeeded. But you did not understand something fundamental about sovereigns." She crouched down, bringing her face level with his. "We do not rule through force," she whispered. "We rule through choice." Every sovereign in history had the power to compel obedience, but the greatest among them never used it. They earned loyalty, they earned love, they earned the right to lead by being worthy of it. You could have had that. You could have been remembered as the Alpha who united the packs, who brought peace, who built something beautiful. Instead, you chose fear. You chose violence. You chose to hurt people because it was easier than trying to understand them. She stood, looked around at the warriors still kneeling, their eyes wide with shock. "I am Aurelia Thornheart," she said, and her voice carried across the camp like thunder. "Last of the sovereign bloodline, mate to the Nightfang twins, and I claim authority over every wolf who can hear my voice, not through force, through choice. I offer you a choice right now. Kneel to me because you want to, because you believe in a better way, because you are tired of living in fear of a leader who rules through pain. Or stand, walk away, return to your packs and your territories and your lives. I will not stop you. I will not hunt you. You are free." Silence. No one moved. No one stood. And then one by one, the warriors pressed their foreheads to the ground. Not because she had commanded it, but because they chose it. Aurelia felt tears prick her eyes. Not from pain, from understanding. This was what her ancestors had built. This was what Raven had tried to destroy. A world where wolves followed not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "Raven Blackthorn," she said, turning back to the fallen Alpha. "You killed my family. You hunted my mates. You threatened everything I love. By every law of our kind, I should kill you here and now. No one would blame me. No one would mourn you." Where Raven's red eyes lifted to meet hers, and she saw fear there. Real fear. "But I am not going to kill you," Aurelia continued, "because killing you would make me no different than you. Instead, I am going to offer you the same choice I offered your warriors. Kneel because you choose to. Swear loyalty to the new order we are building. Help us create a world where power is not measured in bodies but in bonds. Or walk away. Leave these lands, never return. Live out your days knowing that you could have been part of something great and you chose to be part of nothing instead. You would let me live." Raven's voice was hoarse, broken. "After everything I have done, I would give you a choice," Aurelia corrected. "What you do with it is up to you." For a long moment, Raven did not move, did not speak, just stared at her with those red eyes, and she could see him wrestling with decades of violence, of cruelty, of ruling through fear because it was the only thing he knew. Then slowly he shifted back to human form, knelt properly, and pressed his fist to his chest in the old gesture of fealty. "I swear," he said, and his voice shook with something that might have been relief. "I swear on the moon and the blood and the pack. I will serve. I will protect. I will help you build this new world, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn forgiveness for the lives I have taken." Aurelia reached down and placed her hand on his head. "Then rise," she said, "and be welcomed." 3 months later, Moonstone Cathedral stood at the heart of the Northern Territories, a structure so old that no one remembered who had built it or why. Its walls were made of white stone that seemed to glow under moonlight. Its ceiling was open to the sky, allowing the stars to look down on whatever ceremonies took place within its walls. Tonight, those walls held a coronation. 50 packs had sent representatives, alphas and lunas from across the continent, elders who remembered the old stories, young wolves who wanted to see if the legends were true. They filled the cathedral to capacity, standing shoulder to shoulder, watching as Aurelia Thornheart walked down the center aisle. She wore white, Not the white of a bride, though she was that too. The white of a sovereign, a dress that seemed to be made of moonlight, flowing around her like water with silver thread, forming patterns that matched the ancient symbols from the cave where she had first found her mates. Her hair was unbound, falling in waves down her back. Her feet were bare, touching the stone with each step, grounding her, connecting her to the earth and the wolves who called it home. Behind her walked Cassiel and Zephyr, her mates, her king consorts. They wore black, severe, and elegant, their eyes bright with pride as they followed their sovereign to her throne. The throne itself was simple, stone, ancient, worn smooth by centuries of sovereigns who had sat there before her. It stood on a raised platform at the front of the cathedral, and above it hung a crown that had not been worn in 1,000 years. Silver, forged in the shape of a wolf mid-howl, its mouth open to the moon, its eyes set with stones that glowed the same gold as Aurelia's eyes. She reached the platform, climbed the steps, turned to face the assembled wolves. An elder stepped forward, ancient, bent with age, but his eyes were clear, bright, filled with tears. "I never thought I would live to see this day," he said, his voice carrying through the cathedral. "Never thought the sovereigns would return. Never thought the prophecy would be fulfilled. But here you stand, Aurelia Thornheart, last daughter of the old blood, first queen of the new age." He lifted the crown from its stand with shaking hands. "By the power vested in me by the council of elders, by the testimony of 50 packs, by the will of the moon herself, I declare you sovereign, ruler of all wolves, protector of the weak, champion of the bond. May your reign bring peace. May your wisdom guide us. May your line endure for 1,000 generations." He placed the crown on her head, and every wolf in the cathedral, as one dropped to one knee, not because they had to, because they wanted to. Aurelia stood there, crowned, surrounded by her people, her mates at her side, and felt something she had not felt since she was a child too young to remember her parents' faces. Belonging. She was home, not a place, not a territory. Home was these people who had chosen to follow her. Home was Cassiel's steady strength and Zephyr's fierce warmth. Home was the life growing in her belly, still too small to see, but present in the bond, a fourth heartbeat joining their circle. Home was knowing that she had survived everything the world had thrown at her and had come out the other side not broken, but forged into something stronger than she ever imagined possible. She raised her hands and the wolves stood. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing, for choosing, for being here. We have a lot of work to do, a lot of healing, a lot of bridges to build, but we will do it together, as pack, as family, as one people under the moon." The cathedral erupted in howls, not of war, of celebration, of joy, of hope. And Aurelia Thornheart, who had once been called broken, who had been rejected and exiled and left to die in the snow, smiled, because her story was not a tragedy. It was a triumph, and it was only just beginning. 6 months after the coronation, a messenger arrived at Silver Peak carrying news from the east. Another sovereign bloodline had been discovered. In Japan. A young woman who had spent her entire life believing she was human until the day she shifted into a wolf with golden eyes and a mark that pulsed with ancient power. She was alone, afraid, hunted. Aurelia read the message twice, then handed it to Cassiel, who read it and passed it to Zephyr. "We have to go," Aurelia said. "We have to help her." "Agreed," both her mates said in unison, because that was what sovereigns did. They protected, they guided, they ensured that no one had to face the darkness alone. Aurelia stood from her throne, one hand resting on her swollen belly, where their daughter grew strong and healthy, and looked out over the territory she had claimed, the people she had saved, the future she was building. She had been broken. She had been rejected. She had been cast out to die. And she had survived. More than survived. She had become exactly what the prophecy promised. A sovereign, a queen, a leader who ruled not through fear but through love. And anyone who thought that made her weak would learn, as Robin had learned, that there was nothing more powerful in the world than a wolf who had nothing left to lose and everything left to fight for. Her story had started in the snow, bleeding and alone. It would end surrounded by pack, by family, by the legacy she would leave for generations yet to come. They had called her broken. They were wrong. She was sovereign, and she was just getting started.